Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock. I am your host, Christopher Mader, proving once again that this show is going nationwide. Calling down from Georgia is Jacqueline Peterson. Jacqueline Peterson is the Georgia State Director for the Convention of States, Georgia, and she is here to take part. This is part 2 of a video series that I'm putting together on an Article 5 convention. There's been a lot of talk about this. It's gaining in popularity this year, but it's been around for a number of years, actually. And like I said, this is part 2 of a continuing series. Earlier, a few weeks ago, I interviewed Hal Shurtleff from the John Birch Society, and Jacqueline is coming on, and she's going to sell me on the idea of a Article 5. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Jacqueline Peterson. Jacqueline, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so
we really appreciate it.
why don't you start off, tell us what Georgia's doing, and specifically what your organization is doing, and tell my audience about what an Article 5 constitutional convention is.
Okay. First off, I have to correct you because it is not a constitutional convention. It is a convention of states.
Ah, very good. Thank you.
Yes. Per Article 5 in the U.S. Constitution, there are 2 methods by which the U.S. Constitution can be amended. One is the traditional route, the one that we've used throughout the years, and that's through the U.S. Congress. The secondary choice is through a convention of states, where the states convene together in a convention and they propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution. In that case, Congress only has 2 duties. Congress, upon application of 34 states, shall call a convention of states. And then once any amendments come out of that convention, then they will be sent to Congress, and then Congress will determine which way any amendment will be ratified, and they send those amendments to the states for ratification.
Yes.
So in the states, they can be ratified either by the state legislators or by conventions in the states themselves.
This is a rather lengthy and I want to use the word convoluted process. I mean, our founders intended it to be that way, to keep this will-nilliness out of just adding amendments, didn't they?
Well, I just disagree with you on convoluted, because I think that the state legislators are closer to the people than any other representative in the nation. And we, the people, know that we need to do something, and this is the way we can do it. We were only organized, we were founded in August of 2013, so we've not even been around for a year.
Sure.
I joined the Convention of States of Georgia as the director in September after reading Mark Levin's book. And since September, we've already passed the COS resolution in Georgia. It's called SR 736. We also passed HB 930, which is a Delegate Selection and Limitation Act. And the people of Georgia are on board with the Convention of States. We've also filed the legislation in 14 other states this past session, and 2 of which, Florida and Alaska, also were successful in getting it passed. So we have made huge strides in under a year.
What are some of your concerns that are surrounding people like Lawrence Lessig, Mark Meckler, St. Jaeger from Young Turks, George Soros backing up a lot of this, and I mean there's a Harvard Law person, a University of Texas Law School, Sanford Levinson. He's calling for the entire Constitution to be rewritten. I mean, who are these people? What is this is, I think, what scares a lot of Americans surrounding an Article 5, or as you say, a convention of states. Take it from there, please.
Oh, yeah, I can take it from there, because just like you have a liberal politician and you have a conservative politician, there are Article 5 movements on the far left, and there are Article 5 movements on the conservative side. Lawrence Lessig, George Soros, and those gentlemen want to overturn Citizens United. That's why they want Article 5, and to deal with other things in the U.S. Constitution. Our call with Convention of States is to rein in the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, to impose term limits upon federal officials, and to institute fiscal restraint upon the federal government. And I don't know about you, but I don't think George Soros would support any of those 3 calls.
No, I don't. Because, and this is part of the angle that some of the research that I've done, I mean, these people are calling for a rewriting of the Constitution, whereas you guys, with the Convention of States, you're trying to hold the federal government a little more accountable and try to rein in the power. But what's to make these people even follow this amendment? They don't follow any of them right now.
Because a Convention of States has never been held. The last time any sort of Convention of States was held was in 1922, and it was the Santa Fe Convention, and it was about the Colorado River, and only 6 states were present.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, the only intent at a Convention of States was in 1864, prior to the Civil War, and it was called the Washington Peace Conference, at which 27 states were present. So if we are successful in getting 34 states to call for a Convention of States, you can bet that Washington, D.C. will be freaking out.
Yeah, exactly, really. So what is Harry Reid's big deal with Citizens United? I mean, Harry Reid turns around, and I took some notes here. Here comes the question. What is interesting is that these groups, the ones that we were just talking about, they're forming their own political action committees. But they're waging war against other political action committees, like corporations, and claiming that those corporations do not have personhood status. But yet here they are forming their own corporations in order to fight Citizens United and the ability of a corporation to take part in the electoral process. Can we spell irony here? What's going on with that?
Well, that's why a Convention of States is so important, because we, the people, control a Convention of States, not Harry Reid, and not Washington, D.C. We don't need Washington, D.C. We don't need Washington, D.C. We don't need any of those things. We need our state legislators, the guys who we see, men and women that we see at the store, right. The men and women who have businesses in our community. That's who we need to stand for, we the people. We're pushing all of that Washington, D.C. stuff aside, doing what we're doing.
Exactly. But what's going to happen? Let's look down the road. When I was talking to Hal Shurtleff, one of the things he says is even if all this goes through, you're still not looking. You're looking at about maybe 8 to 10 years before anything that gets passed in a Convention of States or even an Article 5, whatever ends up being passed. You're looking at 8 to 10 years before any of this actually gets put into play. All the states have to ratify it. Everyone has to agree. What is it? It's 3/4 of the states have to. Once it's all passed, it goes back to the states, and they all have to agree on it. It's 3/4 of the states. Yeah, you're looking at about 8 to 10 years, aren't you?
I would beg to differ. I don't think we have 8 to 10 years, frankly. And if you watch the news and you see the federal government and the crises that they are manufacturing on a daily basis, there's obviously an agenda in the long run.
Sure.
And we need to stand. We need to speed this up. Like I said, I have never seen anything move as fast as I have seen it. And to be honest with you, here in Georgia, we passed this legislation in 33 legislative days.
That's amazing.
God's presence was with us.
You can't.
That's the only way that we were able to get that done. Here in
Massachusetts, you can't even get a bill on the floor to be read in 33 days. It's unbelievable. But here's my thing.
Well, never say never, Christopher, because I do believe that if we work towards a solution, then we are going to be successful. If we find the right solution, this nation was formed with God's providence, and if we will return our nation to God and to the founding principles and to the U.S. Constitution, I believe we're going to find a way to get it done.
Now, is this a lot of I'm going to use the word angle, but please don't take it the wrong way. Is this the angle that a lot of people in your group are using to push the resolution, or who have pushed the resolution through in Georgia, that there are certain guiding principles that brought this nation into being, and one of them is the belief in the protection of divine providence? Are you trying to make the legislators understand? Because I don't think a lot of legislators today, both at state levels and on federal levels, understand the importance and the guiding principles that have founded this nation.
I would disagree with you there. There are a lot of legislators that we have met with who perfectly understand our Constitution, and they understand that the Constitution was formed to control government, not to control people. And that's a paradigm shift that a lot of people have to understand. Now, Georgia is a lot different than Massachusetts. It has been since day one, since our founding. Massachusetts has been different than Georgia. But here in Georgia, the Constitution is alive and well, and the founding principles are alive and well.
That's excellent. Because I got news for you. They're not alive and well here in Massachusetts. It's really crazy. I mean, it's the communist state. It's the communist Commonwealth of Massachusetts is what we. No, it really
There are good people in Massachusetts.
I know
My husband renovate hotels around the country. We work in Massachusetts, and there are some very good patriots.
I know that. I belong to several of the groups myself, but no, believe me, I know there's a lot of good people, but we're behind enemy lines. It's almost like California light out here. But so
that's not good.
How many people plus or minus are in your particular Georgia organization? And tell us about some of those people. How this started, who did you talk to? Basically, give us the history of your organization.
Okay. Well, like I said, I joined Convention of States as the director in September. And I was already connected. We have a website called www.conventionofstates.com where you can volunteer. And we have about 16,000 volunteers on board with our movement right now in the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. We didn't start our Facebook page until March 9th, and we've already got 12,000 people, 12,000 likes on our Facebook page. And our posts get shared, like we had a post last week that got shared 2,300 times.
Good.
So, I'm sorry, we got 2,300 likes. It was shared 568 times.
Good.
And what we do, we go out to, we have, the way that we're organizing, there are 180 House districts in the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to get a district captain in each of those House districts, of which right now we have 53 district captains in the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. So we've got quite a ways to go. But for 6 months, that's pretty good. And our goal is to have 18,000 volunteers, but we think we'd like to get around 180,000 eventually.
Right.
Because it's easy, at least, and I'm talking from Georgia now, it was easy to pass the resolution here in Georgia because we have good legislators.
Now,
but the difficulty is going to be electing the delegates and influencing the amendments. And our new goal is that we want to decide as Georgians what we would like to see our legislators create as far as amendments go, because we want those forever to be known as the Georgia Amendment.
Interesting. And, I mean, there's the Convention of States here. You're looking at budget ballot amendment, campaign finance amendment. There's more here. I'm not sure if this is your group specifically. National debt relief, term limits of Congress, and term limits for the Supreme Court. I know you sent me a copy of the Georgia bill. I'm sorry. I was looking for it to get ready for this. I was like, God, I lost the damn thing. So, but I know you know what it is because you guys helped put it together. So tell us what's in the language of the bill and go over again some of the specific things that Georgia is looking for, like you just said, what you want the legislators to draft in your amendments.
Okay, well, I've got the legislation here right in front of me. So what I'm going to do is
just read it. Just go ahead.
Read it. Okay.
Just take over.
Okay. Whereas the founders of the Constitution of the United States empowered state legislators to be guardians of liberty against future abuses of power by the federal government, and whereas the federal government has created a crushing national debt through improper and imprudent spending, and whereas the federal government has invaded the legitimate roles of the states through the manipulative process of federal mandates, most of which are unfunded, and whereas the federal government has ceased to live under a proper interpretation of the Constitution of the United States, and whereas it is the solemn duty of the states to protect the liberty of our people, particularly for the generations to come, by proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States through a convention of the states under Article 5 of the United States Constitution to place clear restraints upon these and related abuses of power. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the General Assembly of Georgia that the General Assembly of the State of Georgia hereby applies to Congress under the provisions of Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States for calling of a Convention of States limited to proposing amendments to the United States Constitution that impose fiscal restraints upon the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress. So that's generally the body of what it is that we have here.
That's amazing. That's very well written. And you don't have any fears that See, that's my fear, is that something somewhere, I know how government works, somewhere along the way, it's going to get co-opted, corrupted, something's going to happen. Do you have any fears, and are there anything, or is there anything that you guys are putting in place to avoid that?
Actually, there is, because there are people like the John Birch Society who greatly are terrified of using our Constitution. So what we did in Georgia, we passed the bill, and this came out of the Mount Vernon Assembly, otherwise known as, they changed their name to the Assembly of State Legislators. It's called Bill H-930, and that is a Delegate Selection and Limitation Act of the state of Georgia. And what that does is it confines any delegates from Georgia to the call of the convention. So say some crazy person gets elected as a delegate, and they go to this convention, and they want to throw out the entire Constitution. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment, the First Amendment. Right. We can immediately recall them. In Georgia, not only can we recall them, but we can charge them with a $100,000 fine and charge them with a felony and put them in jail.
Exactly right. Because I'll tell you, here's the thing. Like you just said, some crazy person gets out there and wants to completely throw out the Constitution. That's what all these other guys want to do. And
exactly.
Do you, when you speak to the legislators in Georgia, and you work the room and you've been pushing this, do you hear that fear from some of the legislators? Do they reassure you? Do you try to implore to them that you don't want them involved? And have you heard of any attempts by any people putting the conventions together, that they're not going to let these people take the floor? They're not going to let these people, what the term is, a runaway convention. They're not going to allow that to happen. Are you hearing any of that? Any guardrails putting up to prevent that?
Actually, yes. And as I mentioned, the Mount Vernon Assembly that have changed their name to the Assembly of State Legislators, they met on December 7th of 2013 for the first time in Mount Vernon, and then they met again in Indianapolis June 12th and 13th. And at that assembly, 33 states were represented, and out of that assembly came things like HB 930, the Delegate Limitation and Selection Act.
Sure.
In order for any crazy amendment to be ratified, now think about this for a minute, you'd have to have 76 legislatures in the United States of America pass it.
Right.
So, I mean, if 76 legislatures in the United States pass a crazy amendment, our republic is dead anyway.
Yeah, it's doomed already, right?
So that in and of itself is a deterrent for craziness. But the state legislators are meeting, already drafting laws about this, rules for the convention. They're already drafting the plan for the convention, so it cannot be co-opted by Washington, D.C.
Interesting.
So they're ahead of their game. They're meeting again in Atlanta in December of this year.
That makes me feel a lot better. I did not know that.
Good.
Even talking to Hal, we didn't cover that. He didn't mention it, but of course, he's a Bircher, so he's the Northeast chairman of the John Birch Society. So he's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine. He's worked with me on the show, and I've been to a lot of John Birch events. He's a really nice guy. But I did not know that, and he did not mention that. Now, you talk about crazy amendments. The crazy one that I can think of is prohibition. Now, this is what I'm talking about. Obviously, they had to have gotten together. Obviously, they had to have a convention of states or some sort of Article 5 in order to pass this. This is a completely unconstitutional amendment from the standpoint of that no government, nobody, and no entity has any right to tell any other American what they can eat, drink, wear, say, do. This is part of what we call natural law. But somehow that happened. Now, are these restrictions, is this as a result of what happened back when Prohibition was passed? It's like you don't want to repeat that piece of history. You want to make sure that these restrictions are in place so that we stick to the game plan and that we actually return power. Because, when we're talking about amendments and we talk about laws being passed in Congress, very few laws that are passed in Congress today have anything to do with expanding liberties or expanding our rights or reaffirming them as per the Constitution.
Right.
So, yeah, Jacqueline, you know what I'm talking about. Everything that comes out
Oh,
of Congress.
yeah, you and I are on the same boat on that.
Yeah, everything that...
Anytime Congress comes together, or U.S. Congress, they do nothing to take away our rights.
Exactly. But this is my point. Are these rules and restrictions that you just told me about as a result of what we see in Congress and the stupidity that surrounded the Prohibition Amendment?
Not really. What they are is just the state legislatures taking control of the convention. And that would be the natural course of any action of a convention of states. It's really not been done in our history. The Washington Peace Conference that I mentioned earlier in 1864 was unsuccessful. But today I feel like, and we all feel like, that our problems are so severe that we're going to do this, and we're going to do it to peace. And we need to have all the guidelines in place so that it cannot be co-opted. And you had mentioned something earlier about campaign finance reform.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because that's really not part of our call. We're talking about things like term limits on the Supreme Court, term limits on Congress, redefining the Commerce Clause and returning it to the original Constitution as written rather than as interpreted.
Sure.
We're talking about returning our government to its enumerated powers. Exactly. What we're talking about.
Exactly. Interestingly, I read a book a couple of years ago. It's called The Tea Party, 3 Principles by Elizabeth Price Foley. And there's a section in there called, it was written in, the 3 principles are limited government, unapologetic American sovereignty, and constitutional originalism. And what she had mentioned in that third part was that not only had Supreme Court decisions been made throughout the entirety of the history of the United States, but laws, legislation, even some of the amendments that had been passed in the Constitution. What she said is there's anywhere from a 4 to 6% margin of error in interpreting the Constitution from succeeding administrations as we went down the line. And then what ends up happening is let's say a precedent was passed in 1915. And then somewhere in 1970, the Supreme Court revisits it because they're using that as precedent. Well, in 1915, there was like a 4% error in the constitutional interpretation. Now, in the 1970s, the Supreme Court is using that as precedent. So now the potential for constitutional error, misinterpretation, grows exponentially. And I think what we've run into today is because our legislators just will-nil pass anything that they want, they're so much in error of interpretation of the Constitution that they're able to get away with passing completely unconstitutional laws. You just mentioned the Commerce Clause. They even use the Commerce Clause as part of passing Obamacare. And Obamacare, as anybody knows, it's completely
unconstitutional.
Exactly. And I don't care what you say about, we've got to insure the poor. First of all, Obamacare has nothing to do with insuring the poor. I mean, it's just a gimmick. It's just a business gimmick. And all it benefits is the elites, and all it benefits is the special interest groups, and you know that. But this is what I mean, is that we keep misinterpreting until we're at the point where we are right now. Now, do you think that if we have this convention and the people get together, that there's going to be some serious soul-searching to make sure that we don't misinterpret the Constitution?
I do, and I take that as part of our duty as Convention of States to further enlighten Georgians as to the Constitution.
Right. Because
a paradigm shift has to happen in the states with the people to understand really what our Constitution says and what it means. Because if we were to really look at the Constitution and the enumerated powers, everything domestic within a state should be governed by the state, not by the federal government.
Yeah, this is a big problem.
So, it's a huge paradigm shift that's going to have to take place. And so that's why we travel around. We are currently promoting Michael Ferris's The Constitution Reclaimed.
Yep.
It's a great DVD series that we have available that educates people on the Constitution. It talks about the Supreme Court overreach. It talks about their legislation from the bench. and it tells people in a very incremental way what we need to do to get back to our Constitution.
How close are we? How close are we to this actually finally sitting down one night and hearing on Fox News, Constitutional Convention gathers at, I don't know, I'll pick a city, gathers in Denver, Colorado, and we're going live there, and then all the states are there. How close are we? How close are we to actually sitting down in front of the TV and watching this get hammered out?
I think realistically it's going to happen. Our initial goal was 2016, which I still think is possible, like I said, with God's providence. But I realistically think it's going to be something in 2017 we will hold the convention itself. One thing that I need to tell you that's really important that everybody understand about a convention of states is it's one state, one vote. It is not like a presidential election where you have all these electoral votes heavily weighted before we even begin.
Sure.
This is one state, one vote. The Assembly of State Legislatures just, again, set the precedent for one state, one vote, because in their assembly in June in Indianapolis, they were passing a resolution, and there were a couple of amendments to that resolution, and the yeas and nays were not readily discernible. So what they did is they held a roll call vote. And even though Florida had 12 delegates there, Florida got one vote.
Sure.
Georgia had 6 delegates there. Georgia got one vote.
Right.
So that's how we win. There are 28 states that have conservative leadership in the state.
Yeah.
So that leaves us another 6 that we need to get to call the actual convention.
Sure.
And those are states like Kentucky and Nebraska, states that typically vote conservatively anyway. And then once we get to convention, it takes 26 states to approve an amendment to be sent to Congress.
Yes.
So once it's in Congress and it gets sent out, 38 states have to ratify, like you said.
And like you just said,
it's very doubtful that anything extreme is going to get ratified by 38 states.
Exactly. And like you just said, each state, they get one vote. They might have 12 delegates or 6 delegates. And the other thing is all the delegates, they all have to agree that, yes, this is what we're going to do. This is what our amendment is going to be. And it has to be pursuant to the legislation. The legislation, which you just read to my audience, it has to follow within that narrow guideline. So, yeah, it sounds like there's checks and balances upon checks and balances. Even the checks and balances have to be checked and balanced. It's
exactly.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
With Convention of States, every state is passing exactly the same legislation that I just read you.
Right.
Florida passed exactly the same language. Alaska passed exactly the same language. And in every single state that we audited, it's exactly the same language.
Didn't you say Alabama? I saw you posting. Alabama just came on board, too?
Yes, Alabama is on board.
How many states do you have now? How many states?
We filed it 15 states last session.
Okay.
Including New Jersey, believe it or not.
Right, and you have all 15 states? They all signed on?
No, we passed it in 3 in full. We passed House here, Senate there, like we're halfway done, and the remainder of the 12. So
even New Jersey, huh? You even got New Jersey, huh? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we are organized in 44 states.
I was gonna say, yeah. What about Massachusetts? Do you have people working up here?
Yes, we do. We have a state director. Her name is Ann Shannon Marcotte.
Hang on. Spell that for me. Ann?
A-N-N-E.
Go ahead.
Shannon, S-H-A-N-N-O-N. Marcotte, M-A-R-C-O-T-T-E. And she has a Convention of States Massachusetts page as well on Facebook.
Excellent.
And our national page is www.conventionofstates.com.
I'm actually going to get hold of Shannon. Now, where is she? Is she in the Boston area? Obviously she lives here, right?
Yeah, she lives there, and she's she's outside of the Boston area, but she's pretty close to the Boston area.
I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm gonna hit her up, tell her you sent me. I'm going to try to get her on the show. I'm also going to try to, since she's in this area, I'm actually going to invite her to my August 30th candidate symposium. That's why I asked you for her information. And if I've got it wrong, I'll just email you and have you correct me on it anyway. So, well, Jacqueline, this sounds. I'll tell you, I feel a lot better. I really do. I've Sometimes, I don't know, maybe I just scare myself. I've been trying to do a lot of research. I've been trying to get information. I've been looking at all the stuff you've been sending. And to a certain degree, it gets a little confusing, only because it's just so overwhelming. There's so much information out there. But the way you just explained it, again, that interaction that I told you about earlier off the microphone is, yeah, it makes me feel a lot better. What's next for you guys? Now that you said you've got some of the states, you've got it active in 44 states. You said you've only got, how many states actually signed on again? How many were that?
3 states passed it in full.
Yeah.
But there are 12 other states that have it in some sort of progress. Like New Jersey is in session all year.
Okay.
But they just filed it last month, so it's possible that one could pass shortly. So there are 12 states working it through the system right now. 3 have passed, and we expect to get the other 19, 20,
sure.
whatever we need next year. That's our goal. And you guys can help us in Massachusetts. Miracles do occur.
Sure.
Today.
Right. Well, like I said, I'm going to get hold of Ann, and I'm going to get her on the show, and we're going to continue this series. Jacqueline, this has been great. Thank you so much. But what's next for you? What do you have a forum coming up? Some sort of meeting that's coming up? Anything that's coming up, like within the next few weeks or months, concerning this Convention of Saints?
Nationally or in Georgia?
Either. I'm just asking you, what's next for you guys?
Okay, we're continuing to spread the word and build our army in Georgia because, like I said, our goal is 18,000, but we really want to reach 180,000 supporters in Georgia. We're helping spread the word in all the other states around the nation. We're reaching out to legislators. We're reaching out to people like you, like this show. We go to rallies. We were at a rally yesterday with the Black Robe Regiment, Concerned Veterans for America, Oath Keepers,
Oath Keepers, yeah.
the Tea Party,
yeah.
and the Republican Party. We had a huge rally yesterday here in Georgia, and we're all uniting together to save our nation because we all need to act. We need to act.
Now we have, obviously there's an election, this is an election season. We have a lot of state reps, state senators, people running for Congress. We've got a gubernatorial race going on. I'm sure the same thing is going on in Georgia. What are some of the candidates saying about this? Is this a campaign issue down there?
It is a campaign issue. We've gotten several endorsements from candidates that are running for office. We've gotten endorsements from our Senate candidates. We've gotten endorsements from virtually almost every legislator.
Amazing.
So,
well, legislator, I'm talking about candidates, anybody who's running.
Candidates and legislators.
Everybody's on board. This is news down there, because I got news for you. I've been doing candidate interviews. Nobody's mentioned it. Nobody's mentioned it, and to a certain degree, some of the candidates I've mentioned it to, some I haven't, only because of the way the interview's going. There's certain other topics we want to discuss during those types of interviews. But as far as a news item or a campaign issue, no, I haven't heard it up here. I haven't heard it at all. So that's refreshing to hear that's going on in Georgia. So,
yeah, and we've had, we have a few John Birch people down here who
fighting
and they're scared to death, right? But to me, when a congressman or a U.S. congressman or a U.S. senator takes an oath of office, they're swearing to uphold the Constitution.
Yeah.
Article 5 is in the Constitution.
Yes.
So you cannot be selective.
You cannot. And I was just one of the reasons why I'm very busy this weekend is I went to a National Defense Authorization Act protest out in front of Worcester City Hall, right here in Massachusetts, right in the city. I live there. Only because I'm kind of following up on a story I had already written for the Worcester Herald, but this gets back to following your constitutional oath. I literally filmed, and it's on my show page, and it's in the newspaper that I write for. I watched the Worcester City Council just quite literally, right in front of everybody's eyes, violate their constitutional oath. I filmed it. I titled it as such. Got a lot of hits on the newspaper. And then, of course, the NDAA people said, we're going to have a protest. Can you please cover that for us? I said, sure. I did some more filming. But it's staggering. Just the way, and they do it so blithely, like, what? What? No, we're legislators. We know what we're doing. We're not violating anything. It's flabbergasts. I mean, what have you run into that? Have you seen that down in your neck of the woods?
Not that blatantly, not in state politics.
That's
no.
amazing.
Not in state politics.
Yeah.
I've seen it on the federal level.
Yeah.
We have seen it on the federal level, but not on the state level.
Well, like you just said, it sounds like down in Georgia, you're more constitutional minded. It sounds like your legislators and the citizens in general have a sharp beat on this thing. And as I just told you earlier, I'm here in Massachusetts. Yes, miracles can happen. We're in bizarro world out here. It's very, very strange. We did get a lot of people, when I was there with the protesters yesterday, we got a lot of people stopping and asking, which is a good thing. At least people are asking questions. The thing that goes on, like I said, we're in bizarro world here in Massachusetts. We have legislators, they just do whatever the heck they want. It's really, really sad. They know what they're doing, and they just do it anyway. But like I said, miracles can happen. Jacqueline Peterson, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Thank you so much, and good luck. I'm gonna get you back on it. I'm gonna get Ann on. I've got this thing, the thing I'm doing August 30th, so I'm very, very busy. So after that's over, I want you to come back on to give us an update of what's happening in Georgia. And feel free to send my name to some of the other people, some of the other delegates, and some of the other states that you people are in touch with. And please tell them, get hold of this Chris Mader guy, get on his show, because I want to expand the series. I want to educate myself, educate my audience, and put a whole series together so that we can just kind of dissect and get through the BS on actually what's happening with the convention of states and or a constitutional convention. Jacqueline, thank you so much.
Godspeed, my friend. Take care.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
That's amazing. That's a great, great, great interview. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for coming on.